Testing. There we go. Alrighty. Ooh, those are bright. Good morning, everyone. My name is Wyatt Barrett, and my senior project is called Focus Up. And it is about how focusing on your work affects your learning and how you study and how you get that work done, efficiently or not. So I'm starting off with a question. What percentage of information do you think you retain? When you listen to a podcast, how much do you think you retain? Or how about a book? When you study for a test, what percentage do you think you retain? I think most people would say that when they study for a test, they retain the largest percentage of information because that is the purpose of studying. So keep that in mind and maybe think about how treating your work as studying can help you do your work more efficiently. So at the beginning of the summer, I got to work. My project idea was making tables, and this actually started last October when I bought a couple of these stair treads from Home Depot. This is the PNG right off of the website. And it turns out, if you take two of these, you put them together, you slap them on top of that thing, and you have an artistically inclined friend paint it, you end up with something like this. This is a relatively simple table, but I think it's important to note that it is functional and also, in my opinion, looks quite good. So, going off of that first table, although I liked it a lot, it had many flaws. One of which was if you put anything on a certain side of the table, it tended to lean a little bit, which is a little concerning. So, for the second table, I wanted to make it stronger, and I wanted the design itself to be more aesthetic, despite it looking so good already. And for the second table, I only used a couple materials that I had at home, some clamps, some wood glue, and $90-ish of wood from Home Depot. Another process that I took for the second table to focus in what I wanted to get done was I did a lot of research. There was a lot of sitting down and just reading and then testing these methods that I was reading about on scrap wood, etc. I didn't want to try to reinvent the wheel because for our project, 50 hours was the highest echelon. And if I had done all of this on my own and tried to reinvent the wheel, it would have taken much longer. So again, for the second table, I wanted a stronger and more aesthetic design. I'm sure we've all heard measure twice, cut once. You want to make sure everything is precise so that you don't make a mistake. Because if you make that mistake, in this case, I got to go back to Home Depot, got to buy more materials, drive home, cut those materials, sand those materials, screw them in. Hopefully, they turn out right. So we want to make sure it's right the first time. As we'll see, I didn't stick to this as much as I should have. And side note, sanding takes a lot more effort than you'd think. If you're ever sanding something, sand it again, sand it a third time. You won't regret it. This is an example of such a thing. It's a very small detail. These table legs are 1.5 inch by 1.5 inch. They're quite small. And if you look at the edges of these table legs, you can see how rough they are before you sand them and how they are relatively smooth afterwards. I think we all have had like a class or a table maybe at home where when you set something down on it, wobbles around, makes a better rocking chair than a table because all the table legs aren't an equal length. So it's important to focus on the small things, like the very fine grain of the wood when you're sanding, or apply this to any other idea, like your spelling or your punctuation in an essay. The details are just as important as the large cuts. So where does focus come in? Now that we know what to improve, such as the sanding, we have to keep it in mind, because if we don't keep it in mind, it's easy to just let it slip away. And then you have to come back to it later and make the same mistakes over and over again. And mistakes are opportunities. They're not setbacks entirely. They might temporarily put you backwards, but in the end, that mistake is going to show you how to avoid it in the future. And even if a mistake was avoidable the first time, sometimes if you make that mistake, you can improve what the product would have been even if you had done it perfectly first. And then again, habits are not built easily. They are repetition, practice, drilling pocket holes into pieces of scrap wood 50 sometimes before I do it on my table, because no one wants to have to start over again. So practice and practice and focus on what you need to improve and make sure that stays in your sight. So these are just some pictures of the second table. This is all the wood besides the table legs and the tabletop. These are the tabletops after they've been glued but not cut. This is one side of the apron of the table, and then that's the whole thing. So that is, in my opinion, a lot of improvement from one table to a second table. But a new set of mistakes was made, as we'll see in a minute, and you have to keep those in mind too. And I will definitely keep them in mind when I make my third outside of senior seminar. I learned for myself, or I didn't learn, but I reinforced, that learning hands-on is better for me. And that's something that we should all focus on when we're trying to learn something, especially when we're doing it for the first time. You have to keep in mind how you best learn or retain that information. Going back to podcasts and books. Some people like to listen to a podcast to learn or read a book. It depends on the person, and you need to know that for you if you're going to focus in on your learning and retain the most information possible. Making small mistakes may seem like failing at perfection, but it's the only way to reach near perfection. And that's what the next slide's about. What is perfection? I think, this is a bit of a side note, but I think we should all strive for perfection, although we should recognize it is not objectively attainable. If we could quantify it as a percentage, no one ever has reached 100% perfection. It is not human to reach 100% perfection. So why would you aim for it? If you don't aim for perfection, you're setting a limit on how much you can improve. So if you aim for 90%, you might get infinitely closer to 90% and never surpass it. But if you aim for 100, you might get to 99.999, etc., until it is indistinguishable from perfect, even if you know there are still mistakes. I think we've all heard it needs to get done at some point when we're writing an essay or doing a project, and the teacher says, you got to finish it up. It's good enough. And that's okay. You have to recognize when you need to move on, but remember what mistakes you made and then fix them the next time around. So this is one of the aforementioned mistakes. This is the far corner of that table, which was purposefully on the far end of that picture. This is not square. If you've done any woodworking, you know square is very important. And even though it's a broad detail, while I was focusing on all of these little mistakes, this evaded my sight. And of course now, when I make my third table, this is going to be added onto the list. But I bet you, now that I've made this mistake, it will not happen again, even if I might have avoided it this time. And I would rather get it done on a cheap practice piece than when I set out to make my own desk for my room, or a bedside table for my mom, or a table I want to sell at a craft fair. I'd rather do this now. So the important stuff, because there was quite a lot there. Focusing on your work, your mistakes, and your learning so that you know how you can most efficiently deal with your mistakes, how you most efficiently learn, and how you most efficiently do your work, and how you can put those together to make the best product in a shorter amount of time. Because when you focus on your work, you learn more and you glean more information from less time. Perfection is not obtainable, but I think we should all try to be perfect, even if we know we won't get there, because we will get ever closer as long as we keep improving. And then lastly, everything takes time, but you can decide how much you value that time. I think we've all heard that time is the most important resource we have. And if you're going to do work, I think you should value the time that you spend, and you should put as much effort and thought into it as possible to do it as well and efficiently as you can. Thank you.
questions?
Forgot about that. Yeah, any questions?
What was your original goal, and how did you have to modify that as you moved forward?
Yeah, that's a good one. That's one you would know. So originally, I actually aimed to make like 6 to 8 coffee tables. And because I actually thought that it would be relatively simple. And it was not. It was a lot of reading and a lot of like practical like application before I could actually put it together. And even when I put it together, I ended up with something like that. So if I had gone for that goal, I wouldn't have focused really. I mean, I would have been rushing and I would have been making poorer final products.
Wyatt, is this a hobby or an interest or a career?
I think more of a hobby. I mean, not sure. You know, I've thought about it, of course, but I think for the near future, it'd probably be more of what you would call a side hustle. You know, something I'd like to do, and if I can make money off of it, because of course I'm not going to keep everything I make, because then I'd just have, you know, a garage full of scrap wood. I don't think my mom would be very happy with that.
What else have you made?
This was actually it for like final products for the summer. I made a couple things just with the scrap wood, just like screwing pieces together. I thought about making a little box, you know. Anyone who's been in Bo for a long time remembers tech ed in middle school, and I think one of the first things you do is you make a little box. And I was looking at some scrap wood, and I was thinking, you know, can I still do that? And I nearly could. I didn't put the time into finishing it, but it's almost there. It's sitting there. It's like, you know, 5 out of 8 pieces put together. Anyone else?
Okay. Nice job.
Thank you very much.